will
come and then they keep
jumping in,
joining. Llega esto. Hola.
All right, I think we'll kick it off. Right, so welcome everyone to another edition of Drinks with the Professor. We're here in the studio, Marco and Ivica, myself.
Hello everyone.
Today we have a special episode where, well, the first time that we don't have a guest in the studio, we have a guest joining us remotely over Zoom. We're hosting today the International Dark Sky Association and their technical director, Mr. Pete Strasser. It looks like a promising show. A lot of you were interested in the topic and in how we will tackle the topic and what we will hear today. So for us, as a manufacturer of external and landscape lighting solutions, this is an association whose work we closely follow and whose guidelines impact the way we design our products and the way we think about designing our products. And we feel that, you know, the impact of outdoor lighting is always a form of pollution, of light pollution. And we hope that today we'll get a bit more insight and we'll try to address some of the ways in which we can minimize this impact. Right, so I'll give the word to Mr. Strasser, who will shortly introduce himself, and then we'll see a bit about the Dark Sky Association, what they do and how they do it. So, yeah, Mr. Strasser,
so
now all up to you.
Take it away. Okay, let me try
yes.
sharing my screen.
Yeah, just a quick one. So guys, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat room, and after the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session, and we'll see what tickles your fancy.
Okay. All right, I can't see what I'm sharing here. So let's go here. Okay. You're seeing the lead slide there, the IDA with the logo on the top. Just got to make sure that.
Yeah, we see the first slide and the second slide.
Oh well, I wonder why. That sucks. Yeah, all right. Well,
at least we'll know what's coming.
Yeah, well, I want to change that. Let me see. I mean, destroy the whole thing. Oh, well, what the hell. International Dark Sky Association. We are an organization, nonprofit, that was founded about 30 years ago. One of the principal astronomers at Kitt Peak here in Arizona, and an amateur astronomer who's also a physician at the University of Arizona, pretty much co-founded the group, saying that they're losing the ability to see the stars. And in Arizona, that has a fiscal impact. There's a couple $2 billion worth of professional astronomical equipment here. So they just can't up and leave and go somewhere else. So they need to preserve it here and make sure that we can have a good science study there. A very fundamental thing about our organization is our name says dark sky, not dark ground. We are about the idea that you can have a good sky and you can have adequate illumination. You can have good lighting. There's no reason why it can't be done. For years, I've been saying that when always considering a lighting project, you must go to the task. What are we trying to do with this light? And the fundamental thing is light when you need it, where you need it, in the amount necessary, and no more. It's an inarguable point that anything more is waste. It's a waste of light. It's a waste of resources to create this light to do nothing. So there's really no point to it. And this assertion has now been shown with IES and IDA. We have now collaborated. We have a memorandum of understanding that these 5 fundamental things should always be considered when designing and seeing if there's a need for light. Is it useful? Is it targeted? Is it going to where it's actually needed? The light levels. Adequacy is what's necessary. There's no need to have extreme. Controlled. With LEDs now, especially, there's the wonderful ability to now control the light, and the color temperature, which really hadn't been an issue until LEDs came about. So when you need it, where you need it, no more, it's all waste. And then we show this one where all the fundamentals have been ignored. It's Chicago, the poster child for how not to light. If you look real closely at that National Geographic, you'll see this little stripes that are going away from you. Those aren't the streets, those are the alleys. They light the alleys really bright because, well, Chicago, there's a lot of crime in there. And they figure, well, if there's more light, things will be better. And they've gone crazy. So you look at that picture, you say, who decided that that was the adequate amount of light? Why not 3 more? Why not 2 less? What's going on here? So the idea of just throwing light at a problem is not a good way to do it. We've got proliferation. So on this particular slide, we have 4 lights within about 15 feet of each other. How? Why did that happen? You're creating these super bright places, and in the areas that aren't lighted, we've now created deep shadows, and everybody's heard the term lurking in the shadows. Well, if we have designed an area to be too bright and not light somewhere else, that's bad. More light doesn't mean more safe. Better light is more safe. Here's a picture of a spectacular glare, light shining on trees. This is at 1 a.m. and this is in a park that is gated closed. So no one can go here. No one can see this, except this is what's going on. That's terrible. There's no reason to do it. And a really important thing in a commercial setting is if you have things too bright, it destroys adaptation. This particular scene here is 850 lux, which is bonkers. It's crazy. You turn a while in another direction and you can't see anything. When you walk under here, your pupils constrict. Now think about that. It's night and we're throwing light at a situation, but it's so bright, our bodies are saying this is too much. Your pupils should never have to constrict tightly in a lighted situation at night, because that's your body is saying this is too much. So let even that be a key. And if you look at this compared to no glare, even lighting, that is a much safer condition. You don't have hot spots, and once you leave that area, you're going to have the ability to see. Your adaptation is not destroyed. So here I say, is this good lighting? What I'm not doing is showing the source. What it is a fast food restaurant to the left, where if I turned and tried to take a picture of it, I would have burned my retinas and my sensor on my camera. But there was light on the parking lot, 2,000-watt metal halide lights on the roof shining down into the parking lot. Now, it's really an interesting thing is to note that in the upper right-hand corner, or upper left-hand corner, is a street light, and it's not on because it's so bright. The sensor isn't letting the light come on. So is this good lighting? No, it's not. There's a much better way that this could be done. Here's another example of these acorn-type lamps. I wouldn't want to be living in that second-story apartment. You'll also notice there's some facade lighting on there that's trying to show off architectural details, and yet the municipal lighting is just blasting it away, totally ruining the architectural detail that they're trying to show there. And the light's way up high, and it's glaring, and it's bad. And I'd like to remember a little history, is that particular design of the lantern was initially designed to contain a flame, which is minimal light output, yet it was there for wayfinding. It was never meant as a general illumination source where you had to see everything at night. So what happens is the infrastructure is in place and things get electrified, and then the light becomes a terrible thing, and it becomes kind of a habit of saying, okay, this is how we're going to light things. So we have these posts. Now, to say the output of a flame is not the same as 1600 watts, which is what we're seeing here. I was blinded by driving in this street in Georgia. I couldn't see how this even came to be. I'm just going to go back to a little history that contained a little flame. Contemporarily, these sorts of lights, the acorn type, let me go back further, is they're not used, they're not installed for how they perform at night. They're installed for how they look during the day, the concept of day view. They look quaint, they look homey, they look like Main Street USA, they look like a nice, quaint ambiance. But at night, I mean, no one ever stood next to that and said, that's good lighting, because it isn't, okay? Needs to be rethought as far as what's the actual task at hand. And lighting it with this sorts of way isn't a good thing. Moving along to, there is progress that's being made in design. The old versus new, this was the changeover of a lighted ball field in Tucson. The one on the left is kind of what people are accustomed to, terrible glare. The one on the right was an improvement, but it really wasn't something that IDA could say this is a well-designed lighting area concept for the community, because there's still a tremendous amount of glare. But now there's the capability of having really good lighting with exquisite control that's available even for large areas that need good lighting, like playing fields. And we now have our community-friendly outdoor sports lighting protocol that you can read about on our website. But it's essentially to say, if a community has decided to put in lights, do the best you can. And we saw a couple examples. This particular field is just south of Tucson, and it's 12 miles away from Mount Hopkins, which has a couple $2 billion worth of astronomical equipment up there. And they can't see this light. They can't tell that it's there. It has no impact whatsoever. So there is the possibility of having very safe lighting, no trespass, no glare. Often it's a problem for a community where the light will spill onto roadways and causes glare, and it's an issue. Well, if it's properly designed, there's no need for that. And that's a really great way of seeing the slide that here, that the road is not lighted at all, and it's only 30 feet away from the lighted area. So the solutions exist for controlling light pollution, even in very large areas that need to be lighted, that have a tremendous amount of hazard. I took this picture of a lighting stanchion in Madrid, in their airport, and so, okay, that's really good lighting. And you can see that it's directing the light down where it needs to go, not upwards into the sky where it's doing no good whatsoever. So when I hear, oh, we can't do it, it's impossible with the lighting technology, we can't light airports, we can't light large areas properly. Yes, you can. It can be done. The solution to light pollution is in all of the lighting catalogs that all the lighting manufacturers have. So is the problem of light pollution. Many of the products that cause the problem are still available, but the solutions do exist, and it just takes the right attitude towards installing the right lights to do the right thing. And this is just an interesting thing that I saw in Cologne, a beautiful summer evening, comfortable outdoor illumination. You have a very tightly packed area, good even lighting, people are happy, and yet 300 meters to the south is this patio, and it's essentially deserted. Even though they're serving the same kolsch as they are in the other nicely lighted area. But people have spoken, and they're saying, no, I don't think this is a comfortable situation. I don't want to sit and relax here because I feel like I'm being interrogated. This is not good lighting. But then if you think about a lot of lighting design and a lot of lighting projects, if they're built to a cost, then this is an issue. Which installation is cheaper? Oh, I can tell you right away, which one costs less to do, but are you getting your money's worth? You've put in a light that just, a lowest bid type installation, and instead of nice light that's even where people are paying to be, you have people fleeing. It's not a place to be. Another issue, I call that on-stage lighting. If anybody's ever been in a television studio or been on stage and you look out towards the audience, what do you see? Nothing, because you have these bright lights in your face. Well, here we have an ATM machine, cash machine, that they wanted to put more light on it, and they did. And it's so bright that when the person turns around and faces the parking lot, they can't see a thing. So is that safe? Is that a good solution to a security problem? Well, it's well lighted, and if more light means more safe, isn't this terrific? And that's an obvious no, that this is bad design. But it was also, that's a lowest bid solution too. How much did this cost? It was probably the cheapest thing they could get, and they slapped it up and said, my work is done, when in fact, the lighting has created more of a problem than it solved. Lighting should always enhance visibility, never impede it. In this particular case, there's two things to note. In the design, when it was originally done, there were lollipop type lights there, and they never really accounted for the fact that these things called trees will grow, and they will now produce branches and leaves and actually get rid of the light where you want it, which is on the pathway. So their solution was to put in these exceptionally bright poles, and if you can see the person in the center of that, and then where'd she go? Well, she's standing under the pole, just off to the right of the pathway there. So a design was done, and this was their solution to end the problem of the trees being a problem. And what they've done is created so much glare and so many shadows that the person is literally standing in front of you and you can't see them, directly under the new source of light to make it safe. Not good. I just want to throw in to Tucson and to other places that there are LEDs being part of the retrofit. I just want to say, if communities are considering it, you want to make sure that the product that you're choosing has the option of aftermarket shielding. You'd think it's a no-brainer, but there are many products that don't have that capability. And here in Tucson, they put in the lights, and if someone complained, they said, oh, well, we're sorry about that. We'll put up a shield. So in this particular case, they were able to put a shield on the extreme left-hand one and the two on the right, and problem solved. There are municipalities that have selected products that don't have that capability, and the response is, sorry, too bad, which is not a really good thing for a community. Here we go. Laudable community effort. Sometimes everything falls into place. You get a regulation, you get grant money, you get people willing to do the work for the right reason. And this is a condominium in Florida right along the beach. And they had the money and went out there and were given the funds to obtain a particular light bulb that didn't have a spectrum that would harm turtles, sea turtle hatchlings that are messed up by that. So they were given the money to go to put in the right things. Our organization was working with the Florida Wildlife Commission, and I went down and tromped through hundreds of miles of chigger-infested weeds to actually look at and verify that they were doing the right things. And then here we see this. The people who ran the place didn't bother to buy the lights they were supposed to. They bought 3,000 Kelvin LEDs and literally dipped them in orange paint, thinking, it's amber, no one's gonna know the difference. Well, they don't know Pete, and when Pete inspects something, he's gonna look at it. And this was their solution, 512 of these fake lights. And they did something else with the money. They didn't put it towards the cause. And that's, the the thing you dream of having the regulation, having the money, having the funds, having the will to do it. And then the last step, it just falls apart. It's really sad. Just want to take a note about efficiency. Efficiency is not everything. You can have solar powered products that are green as can be, no carbon footprint whatsoever, be bad lighting. So efficiency isn't everything. A glare bomb is still a glare bomb. And here is an embarrassing thing. It's in a natural history museum near the Tucson area. And here are some 4,000 Kelvin, 11 watt LED or CFL lights, wide open, blasting into the area. And the fact that they're solar and green, well, that's a laudable effort, but if it's not doing the right thing in the end, it's the weak link in the chain, and that could be better. I'd like to just open up a question. I'm going to throw this to the audience. Is that I have noticed, and I don't know if it's worldwide, but other people have concurred, is that there's a bias towards LED color temperature, where the West likes the warm. As you go further east, there's more of a preference towards the cold CCTs. And I noticed this in the last Light Plus Build in Frankfurt. We have a program where we try to get lighting companies to join and have products in our seal of approval program. And it seems like when I got to about Turkey, all the way towards going to Japan, there are some products, there's some companies that didn't even allow or have 4,000 or 5,000 or 4,000 or lower CCTs because their customers didn't want them. They don't even offer warmer products, which is just kind of a curiosity. And I open that to the audience to see if that's a real valid thing or just something that I've stumbled upon that isn't all that correct. Okay, light pollution, is it diminishing? Can it be measured? It can be measured. The way they do it typically is through satellites. We've all seen the pictures of the Earth at night. It's a very curious thing. You know, you can see the cities and the roads and just the general distribution of the population. The thing to consider though is you'll be hearing reports that with LEDs and the way it's being measured is that the light pollution is being reduced. But you have to see exactly what's happening. What's going on is the VIIRS satellite, which is the one that's doing the viewing now, cuts off at 500 nanometers. It does not see light shorter wavelength, lower down the spectrum than that. And when you look at what a high brightness white LED is, they have a huge peak below the 500 that's there, that is squirting into the environment, but the satellite can't see it. If you look where the cutoff is of 500 nanometers, it's not seeing that tremendous blue emission. So when you start to see, hey, LEDs are making a huge difference, until they change that satellite's capability or have another satellite that can actually measure the light that's out there, it's an artifact of the measurement and not a reality towards actually what's going in. Another issue with the CCT of LEDs is you'll hear people say that moonlight is 4,000 Kelvin and a 4,000 Kelvin LED is that, so they're the same. And that's not the case at all. They have radically different spectral power distributions, which is kind of the reason why using correlated color temperature as a terrible metric for trying to quantify short wavelength radiation or blue light. And it's the blue light, that end of the spectrum, which is the most causative towards problems in the nocturnal habitat and in astronomy with the function of Rayleigh scattering. The short wavelengths really scatter and cause this glow that can go out for hundreds of miles. So when we look at this slide, the blue curve is moonlight, which closely emulates sunlight because that's all what moonlight is, it's reflected sunlight. But you also have a 4000K LED that has that tremendous blue spike. CCT is a calculated, evaluated number, and you can mess around with the spectral power distribution to kind of massage a number and get a CCT that's good. I've seen products that were made that are 3000 Kelvin, and they were simply a 4000 Kelvin LED, and they threw a little bit of more red light into it. And by sort of balancing it, they could say it's a 3000 Kelvin product, but it still has the same amount of short wavelength emission. They goose the numbers by adding some red to change the balance. So that's why we need to come up with a better metric than CCT. Now, I don't sound like I'm really a fan of LEDs, but that's just not the case. They are simply a new technology that we're learning about, but they hold tremendous promise as well, and that is this function of control. The ability to dim the lights, to turn them on fast, to curfew, to have motion sensing, occupancy sensing, all these wonderful control protocols were not possible with the old technology. They are now with the new technology. But because of the older technology not having this, there are very, very few standards or recommended practices that deal with the notion of dimming and bringing back the light rapidly, because the technology of the past didn't provide it. And that's an impediment. We need to have the regulation people, the CIE, IES, et cetera, address the problems that can be solved now, and that is through this ability to control. Most of the motion sensing has been an interior application. The idea for being exterior is novel. We didn't have that capability in the past, and now we do. So the idea that we can dim the lights when it's really not needed is a wonderful function of what LEDs can do. We're also seeing products that didn't exist in the past. I've seen motion control and motion sensing in a fixture, but this is actually in the lamp itself, where they have motion control capability within the lamp. And that sort of thing wasn't allowed before because the technology simply didn't permit it, but now we have these wonderful things. So I'm going to talk about the other aspect of light pollution, and that's how it can impact the nocturnal habitat. And this is in these four particular ways: attraction, that's attracting something to an area where it wouldn't have normally in the past; avoidance, where the critters will stay away from an area that they normally would have been part of their active home range; photoperiod, which is essentially the duration of light versus the duration of short, and how those two interplay with an organism: day length, night length, that sort of thing. And one that's a little less understood is interlunation, where there will be organisms, critters, fish, coral, all kinds of insects that are have their reproductive cycle based upon the moonlight. And that's we are discovering these problems as they are now showing up. It's new problems. This is a kind of a curious thing. It was never a problem in the past. And this is a field of soybeans. And if you look along the roadway there, you can see patches of green where the rest of it is brown. Soybeans are a short day plant, which means when you plant them in the spring, they grow like crazy until June 21st. And then when the days get shorter, they are cued into flowering and setting. And then all the energy is dumped into the production of the fruit. Well, along the roadway there, they put in brand new LED lights, and the spectrum of them is such that the lights shining closest to the beans is preventing completely the change to go to maturity. And it's very subtle too. If you look at that, there's a post, and you look straight out there, you'll see a little line in the deep green. What it is that is the shadow of the pole, where the light shining on those peas, those beans, is enough darkness for them to be cued to turn into the mature plant, but the ones on either side don't. Now, this is something that no one had seen in the past. It wasn't an issue with the previous technology. And now we're seeing that, okay, that represented a 7% loss of yield for the field. Now, that's significant. So it's an important thing to discover. So now they realize, okay, we're going to have to shield these things, that they're actually going to have an impact. That's not sea turtles, and it's not the sky, and it's not I can see stars. It's actually affecting the crop. It's affecting the yield. So it's important. there's lots of research that's now happening because of the LED lights. Nocturnal pollinators going dark, yeah, it's part of the avoidance. They won't go to the area where it's lighted because they're expecting something dark. And I've also seen LEDs don't attract insects, and which is, no, they do. Here's a picture. What else do you need? They most certainly attract insects. They don't produce ultraviolet light, and it's true that ultraviolet light attacks insects, but insects are attracted to things other than ultraviolet light. So yes, they can't be installed as a means of insect control. And I've actually seen products purported to do just that, to install these and you won't have to deal with bugs. Now, what's next? This is a yucca plant, and it is pollinated solely by a single species of moth that's active only at night. Are these going to be impacted? We don't know. So there's a whole lot of unintended consequences that's happening with LEDs and potential problems, and they need to be investigated, and they need to be investigated promptly because the bad things can happen. Migrating bats. This is in the Tucson area. That's the lesser long-nosed bat. They fly up and down during the year, and their migration going south. They follow blooming plants. This is actually I took these in my backyard. That's a Sirius, and the lesser long-nosed bats are here for about 3 weeks in autumn, and then they come in and fly and do their thing. And it's been detected that they follow washes, which are essentially like riverbeds that are dry areas. And they did a test. A U of A astronomy grad student monitored where these bats were going and realized that they stayed exclusively to the dark areas. So if it gets light all over the place, what's going to happen with this normal cycle that's happening for thousands, tens of thousands of years, simply because we've changed lights? Now, the next slide is showing sea turtle hatchlings, and they're kind of the poster child for light at night and how it can impact it, and how changing the light is for the better. The way that the presentation is done, it's showing the critters there. They're cute, they're wonderful, and if they don't go to the sea, they go to the bright thing in a parking lot or go to a road, and an entire hatch gets smashed. They get crushed by cars. They get totally disoriented, exhaustion, they're open to predation. So the sea turtle lighting is a very widely recognized problem for the nocturnal habitat. And the lighting that's used to help them, when in place, you don't get this tremendous die-off that's a problem where the bad lighting exists. There are turtle-safe products. Usually what they're doing is putting out 589 nanometers, which is the spectrum of what a low-pressure sodium light used to be. And that's kind of an interesting point, that in the past, most research was done with the products that were available for technology. And in the case of habitat study, the low pressure sodium light was the only source that had this very narrow spectrum. And it was found that this very narrow spectrum had the least amount of impact on nocturnal habitat study. And it's been extrapolated from that low pressure sodium spectrum is the optimal wildlife lessening impact spectrum, when that's just not the case. Case in point, industry response to their lighting along North Sea oil platforms. There was a problem where migrating songbirds were attracted to the yellow lights, and they would land there expecting to find food, and they didn't, and they would get nothing, no nutrients, and they had trouble getting off the platforms, and there was die-off. So Phillips studied this, and they came up with a product that the birds that visited these areas were not attracted to the light that has a reduction in the spectral content that's there. The problem is there are other critters, other birds and such, can be attracted to different spectrum. So there is no wildlife-friendly lamp. Even now, if you looked at this light, what they did was they removed the red. When the red was the longer wavelengths, when that was the optimal wavelength for sea turtles, it's not the optimal wavelength for the birds in the North Sea. And they took the same light and used it in Hawaii to protect a bird called Newell's shearwater. And the shearwaters were attracted to the light that they weren't attracted to in the North Sea. So the idea that there can be one single spectrum is not the case. The other thing is, you don't hear about in beach environment, when there's putting in a good light for a sea turtle, it ends up being quite damaging to a endangered dune mice. So who gets the preference? We're doing a good thing for the sea turtles, but we're doing a bad thing for the mice. So we're kind of playing God. Who gets the best? It's a conundrum. And just the false statement, it's critical to use wavelengths of 590 for wildlife-friendly lighting, since this is the wavelength that is not visible to animals affected by light pollution. This is absolutely 100% false statement, and it is actively on an LED site right now saying, do this right thing. And then there's the product called Clear Sky, which is essentially the light that was used for the North Sea birds, being promoted as the spectrum that's friendly for all birds. And that's not the case. So we have to be careful with what we're actually specifying. Is it going to actually affect the species of bird that's a problem there? It just so happens that the red end of the spectrum, having the 589, has an impact on fewer species. Let's just say that. It's kind of an oddity that the North Sea birds are the ones that are attracted, or that aren't attracted to that. So, but that's what we're faced with as we're discovering LEDs, that spectral quality is a very, very important aspect that needs to be studied. This is also one of the promises of LEDs themselves, is that you can, through the magic of phosphors, is change the spectral output. And I think the day will come when, if there's an impacted organism, whether it be a bird or sea turtle, is that the phosphors can be tailor-made to put out a light that's not impactful for specific regions and specific critters. So there's a good thing that can happen there. The spectral quality affects both plants and animals, and there aren't straight answers for biology as far as, yes, you can use this one thing. And it's a problem with research. But with new tests and new technologies and new studies going on, we're going to start finding out what these critical wavelengths are for more species. Now, the design of the luminaires is exceptionally important for controlling light pollution, light trespass, and sky glow. There are excellent products out there. The idea that we can't find something that looks good or will satisfy a need, that's old school argument. There are lots of products that have their exceptionally good designs, and we want to help promote them. We have our fixture seal of approval program. At present, there are over 84 companies. In fact, there's 85. I got one today. A brand new company has signed up, and over 1,000 products that we have listed on our website. Go to darksky.org and look for fixture seal of approval, and you will see a database that has the products indicated by company, by color temperature, by application. So if you're looking for a wall pack or a bollard, you can click on that and it'll send you to all the approved products, and with active links that take you to the company's webpage to make sure that you get all the information you need. So the idea of being a dark sky approved product is becoming well known, and it's also being abused. Look for the seal, IDA approved. The reason we say that is because we don't own the term dark sky, and you will find that term used fast and loose to mean anything a company wants under the sun or moon. So you will get things in the mail, or you will get in a catalog that says dark sky compliant or meets dark skies initiatives. It can also be work in the other direction, where I have seen codes, ordinances, specifications for entire projects that say something equally ambiguous must use dark sky approved products. That's not a specific thing. And that's the principal reason why we have our seal of approval, because I check all the products that are listed through photometric testing to make sure that they do in fact meet the claim. Not a week goes by that I get a call from either an architect or specifier saying, I have to put in a dark sky compliant light. What does that mean? Or I'll get people who will call me saying, how could you possibly approve this terrible light when it says dark sky on it? And we're powerless to stop people from using just the simple ambiguous term dark sky. So look for the seal. If it has our seal on it, it's a good product. So there's a solution to light pollution to turn everything off. There's that blackout in August in 2003. This was taken in Toronto. There's that strange thing up in the sky known as the Milky Way. And for once, people actually saw it. And then the next night, the power was restored, and the lights were obliterated, obliterating the Milky Way. Or you can be like this. And with reasonable lighting practice, this view can be restored or preserved for all to see. And I took this from my driveway in Tucson, 2007. I live 8 miles from the city center, and I can photograph the sky like that. But we have parking lots, we have restaurants, we have roadways, but we essentially shine our light down, and we put the light where it's needed and the amount necessary and no more. That's what I have for you.
Okay, great stuff. Very interesting presentation. Thank you so much, Pete. We have a couple, or more than a couple of questions from the guys in the audience. So we'll just go through them now. Should we just go?
Yeah, of course. So, Adam, we're going to come to your question about the Hall of Fame, because it's definitely, I think, longer. So we'll need an explanation there. But going to Ayman's question and note, Pete, there was a question posed from you to the audience, why on the West there is people who like more warmer colors, and then the East cooler color temperatures. So yes, Ayman commented on the same, and that she felt that in the warmer, let's say, areas, the cooler temperatures that are more used, and then while in the areas where it's cooler, people would tend to use more warmer colors. So this is also a few comments when we were traveling, we ran through different experiences, and this is what people told us. So basically you have East, which is warmer temperature, and people need to feel more cool. So this is how they kind of use cooler colors to cool themselves, while the West is the other way around. So it's more of a kind of a fake feeling.
Interesting.
Right. What do we have next? Yeah, so Monica confirmed that in European projects, so where it's a cooler climate, we turn to 2,700 to 4,000 Ks, so nothing cooler than that for residential, hospitality, and offices. Yeah, an interesting question from Linus Lopez from India. Well, a comment before the question. So it seems that the presentation and the work of the Dark Sky Association is mostly aimed at the street lights and the area lighting, and he wants to know what about the facade lights? What about the thousands of lumens that are pointing straight into the sky, and is there any controls and standards for those type of light fittings and that type of lighting?
Yeah, facade lighting, if that's being done, it's really not considered a dark sky friendly practice, but that's not to say it can't be, the harm or the impact can't be minimized. Generally, facade lighting should highlight architecture.
No. It seems we lost Pete.
Architectural detail. I can hear myself. I'm still here.
Ah, okay. We lost you for a bit. I don't know about the other.
Repeat in the last few sentences, please.
Yeah. Facade lighting should be, you want to highlight architectural detail instead of having a solid blast of light onto it. That's a typical way of dealing with it. It should be curfewed. Buildings are not vain, so they don't need to have light shining on them all night. So it's reasonable to shine a light when people are going to be active, to highlight that kind of detail. Same thing like with fountains, statues. It's perfectly reasonable for a community to take pride in such a thing, but it's also reasonable to have the light turned off at night when people aren't there, to curfew them. As I say, statues aren't vain, buildings aren't vain. There's no reason they have to be lighted the entire night. If lighting is going to be done for facade lighting, it's best to have it shine light down instead of light up. That way you're not going to have light that's going to be scattering into the atmosphere or lighting up the undersides of airplanes. And that way you can have it shining down. It is going to be a means of lessening the impact of light pollution. It won't eliminate it, but in some cases you do the best you can. And as opposed to just a blanket statement of don't do it, just think about what you're doing and try to put in the best installation that's optimal for the scene.
Okay, fair enough. What else do we have? Monica was interested in where she could find further reads and researches on how light affects plants and animals and existing guidelines for lighting designers.
Existing guidelines are they're kind of weak in that we don't know the exact spectrum that's going to be impactful for all the species. That's why the idea of minimizing the amount of lumens that are in the area, make sure the light is targeted so it's not going to be impactful going off target. As far as, there's a book called it's the Ecological Consequences of Light Pollution, that is by Travis Longcore. That's probably the most let's say comprehensive book about light pollution, but you'll find it's also about 15 years old, and it doesn't take into account the new problem of the short wavelength emission that's so common in LEDs. I would say if you want to keep up on it, is to like put up a Google alert and say when a new paper comes out that you can read about it, saying, you know, light impact or light pollution impact, or light pollution ecology, and then try to get on the research as fast as you can. Because right now there's a deficiency in protocol because we don't know the exact problems and wavelengths that are the issue.
Okay, Pete. So we have another interesting question of Jason Min, and it is, how much does IDA organizations spend time on educating children and younger generations about the importance of dark sky?
There's quite a bit. In fact, we have an entire education committee that's dedicated to it. You'll find on our website educational units and blocks where for all different age groups and school levels. There are projects that that the students can do. We just had our Earth at, or what was it, Dark Sky Week, where there was a star count that was done, where students from all over the world would participate in a light pollution assessment. So there's education is a very large aspect of what we're doing, and you'll find that information on our website.
Good. Okay. A few more. Thank you guys for the questions. Let's see who's next.
Adam Lamar.
Yeah, Adam Lamar has a question on turtle lights, where he states that some areas, well, they'll have legislation requiring the dedicated turtle spectrum to be a fixture, integrated source, opposed to a replaceable lamp. And does anyone actually make a turtle-friendly fixture? Is there such a fixture?
There are many. If you go to our website, you can, in the fixture seal of approval list of contents, there is a search parameter that you can click on that says turtle friendly. And what those are will be products that have, I call them chip amber, meaning the chip itself is an amber source that has very narrow spectrum, as opposed to phosphor converted amber. The phosphor converted ambers have an output below 565 nanometers that the Florida Wildlife Commission has deemed excessive. So it's the chip amber source is certified, and there's a whole section of certified products on our website for the very thing.
Thank you. We are also looking into developing, well, at the moment we're looking into 3 of our products that would have that amber chip inside that would be turtle friendly, where that fittings that would be then suitable for installation in those marine environments close to the sea, or wherever you would have a nesting area for those turtles.
Yeah.
Good. So we have another question from Anuka Larson. Thank you, Anuka. It's have you encountered a lighting fixture that has an integrated lux meter aimed down to the ground to dim the lighting automatically when there is snow on the ground?
No.
So quite a complex device, I guess.
Anuka is from Finland, if I'm not mistaken, so quite on top with that question.
And let me tell you, I have the ability to do that now is so simple. It's kind of amazing. It hasn't been done. I mean, I've thought of, I wanted to call this little module Snow Sense. Okay. One of the problems in the past had been the regulation of the recommended practice. It was the unit of measurement was using lux, and now I know for the IES and the roadway lighting is now using luminance. And now that that luminance is now a measurable, a quantifiable amount, there's no reason that you can't have a sensor of sorts that's going to check the reflection and change the output to meet that. Invent it. It seems like it's a product that's so simple. And if I were an electrical engineer, I would have one ready to sell, but I'm not.
Okay, so I hope, Anuka, you got your answer or your help at least, so you can, start thinking in this direction.
There you go.
Right. Another question from Monica. She wants to know if simulating the exact same SPD as the moonlight would help reduce the impact on the nature.
Okay, 2 things there. Most of the interlumination issues take into account that it is a cycle. So there is light and dark even with moonlight. If we had perpetual full moon, that would be just as impactful to the critters that are negatively impacted by the other. The notion of the SPD is kind of, I want to bring that up because people will say it's the same as a 4,000 Kelvin, when it's clearly not. The SPD is radically different, and it's more of a rationale as to why CCT should not be used as a blue light metric. But the issue that, yes, you could make you could make a product that exactly emulates moonlight. In fact, I don't know if you remember, there used to be a product, light emitting plasma. There was a product that was out for a while. It didn't have the efficacy, but it was almost spot on to sunlight and moonlight. So it can be done, but you're still going to have the problem with the cycle of light and dark having been interrupted.
But by honoring that cycle, it would still be, let's say, better to have a fitting that would work that. So to extend, to a certain extent, if we're not using it the whole night through, right?
That may be the case. I've yet to see a study that would validate that. Okay. But I think another thing to consider is when it's a bright full moon, you can see color really well. You can see really well. It's nice. And you're looking at 0.4 lux max. So a lot of the issue that needs to be addressed with light pollution needs to extend beyond just color and timing, and we need to worry about intensity. A lot of this was discovered when municipalities were making the changeover from high pressure sodium to LEDs and realized that they were grossly overlighting, that there was really no need to do so. For instance, in Tucson, where we have lighting regulations in place, we went from 400 watt HPS to 95 watt 3000 K luminaires, and we still exceed the IES RP8, and which is really something. A 3/4 reduction in power, and we're still have enough light. So that should be a wake-up call to any municipality or utility that's making the change. Is you should be able to go 3/4 reduction in wattage to really to make a suitable change, and people won't notice. That's the interesting thing. Nobody complained that it was too dark, and when in fact it was significantly less output, but people had this marvelous thing called adaptation, and they suddenly could see just fine. There's no reason why it had to be so bright, and that needs to be addressed for everything.
I think this is also a light design question or education or concern as well in a quite a big extent, because what also we are asked a lot of times is lumen outputs. So at all times somebody is requiring more and more and more lumen outputs, and we a lot of times do not understand what those lumens are going for. Why are they needed? So.
Well, and that you need to kind of really question why. I don't know if CIE or IES has done the opposite. They're actually dropping their lumen amounts and really not saying that you have to have more. A lot of it happens for two reasons. One is most specifications talk about minimum levels and never maximum levels, and there should be a maximum amount. And the other is that, pardon me, what was my other point? Lumen levels. I forgot. Yeah, I forgot. What was I going to say?
It's 9 a.m. there. It's strange that you're getting stuck. We should
be
the ones getting
I know.
stuck.
Yeah, I know. And you thought this was water. Yeah.
It's all good. No,
anyway, it'll come to me.
Yeah, right. Jason Min with another question. So he says that he's still witnessing and finding many lighting designers that don't know the definite meaning of dark sky. And if you can tell us a bit again, when you say dark sky fixture, what does that mean? Is it zero light coming up from the source, or can we have a reflector reflecting the light up and still mark it as a dark sky compliant fitting?
Yeah, for our purposes, an IDA approved luminaire, it has essentially zero uplight, but we do allow, at least that's from the source, but there is an allowance for reflection from support brackets. The reason we do that is often when there's an LED that has uplight, if it's in the very narrow range of, say, 90 to 100 degrees to 110 degrees, that is the most problematic for sky glow. The light that's shooting out like the light you'd see on a lighthouse, it really scatters. It really is quite intense. Light that's kind of scattered up high and around is far less causative to sky glow. So for our purposes, we can allow up to like, I believe it's 20 lumens of total output for a commercial luminaire that is from the source, not from the source, but from the support brackets. 3000 Kelvin is what we look for as well, or warmer. And a fixed mount is important. Otherwise, you could take a well-designed luminaire and put it on a knuckle mount and mount it at 45 degrees, and you've wasted the entire concept of good design by bad mounting. There's also some safety protocols. Want to make sure they're UL, CE, ETL approved, whatever jurisdiction does in your area. That's pretty much it.
So just to repeat, you said 20 lumens.
Yeah, and there's more to it than that. There's 20 lumens, provided it's no more than 0.5% of the total output.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I remembered my other point. Yeah.
Okay, let's hear it.
The other thing is, people will erroneously presume that more light is more safe and more light is less of a legal hassle. And they're thinking, if I can make it 50% brighter, I've covered my rear end and I'm not going to get sued. So if they ask for 1.5 foot candles and I put in 2, I'm that much safer. My design is that much better. When in fact, that's not the case. And people kind of grossly overuse this. Case in point was that service station that I pointed out in the beginning that had 85 foot candles or 850 lux when the specification is 5. So to have such an exceptional amount of light thrown out there is not a good thing. And that's why there needs to be restrictions on maximum lumen output as well.
Okay, got it. We have another question, and then I think we're done with the questions. So I'm not sure if I understand it correctly. If we have any sheets still here, maybe you can unmute yourself and give us the question. Ask Pete directly. The sheet? It's not there.
Hello.
So there you are.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
So actually my question is that that as of now we are working on a lot of landscape lighting projects in India, and since we are a lot of discussing about the environment and saving the environment in the dark sky also. So my question is that particularly, like, do we have any color temperature effect on the plants or any other landscape area, so that we can use some other controllable lighting fixtures? However, we are already using some sensors and timers to control the LPD values, but is there any specific color temperature to have in the landscape lighting?
Well, the specific color temperature would be correlated to mean having less short wavelength emission. So if you're minimizing the amount of blue light, then that is desirable. So 2700 and warmer is typically the range that you'd see for landscape lighting. That would be what's best for the environment by trying to minimize the short wavelengths.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Pete.
Yep.
Yeah, no, we have another question from Pete that was way up in the beginning. Marco just reminded me. So let me just scroll back up to Pete's first question. Okay, that was a while back. All right, question. Yeah, years ago, Pete was, maybe Adam, yeah, Adam is here. You can go, unmute and shoot.
Okay, Pete, well, sorry, I forgot my new microphones are louder. Okay, so years ago, I was talking to a guy from Hall of Fame about dark sky, and he made a point that some like shoebox style dark sky recommended fixtures were actually very spotty. So at night, while there was no uplight from them directly, they would produce a glare spot on the asphalt that would produce a lot of uplight. And you're saying, and yet we have an all glass fixture that has very minimum uplight, spreads the light out universally on the ground without any spots. So collectively, our uplight going into the air, light pollution, is far less than the dark sky approved fixtures. Now, this is about 10 years ago. Wondered if you had familiarity with this, if you raised the valid point, and if the dark sky standard makes room for that kind of fixture now. That's my.
Yeah, the shoebox design, in the earlier days when you had arc tubes, it was reflector technology was where the money was spent to give good distribution. In many cases, you had the lowest bid, and the reflector was nothing more than an inverted salad bowl, okay, really nothing at all. And yeah, you're right. On a really poorly designed product, you're going to end up with really terrible distribution patterns. That's a 30-year-old thinking, especially now with LEDs. They're so directional that uniformity is significantly better than one of those inverted salad bowl type products. To say that all dark sky approved or dark sky friendly designs have this hotspot is a specious argument. It doesn't exist now. In the earlier days of cheap design, yeah, but I'm sure you could go out today and buy a cheap LED that has terrible distribution, where they're not really spending money on trying to get uniformity to stay within the type 1 through type 5 distribution patterns. So they were right 30 years ago, and it's a different story today.
Okay, any more questions, guys? Gaetana has a question, but you should just send it privately to me, so I'll just read it out. Thank you, Gaetana, for the question. Question: in a beachfront situation, close to turtles' nesting beaches, how to control realistically the amount of light coming from the indoor spaces?
That's a fantastic question, and it needs to be addressed further by the Florida Wildlife Commission. There are only 2 counties that even address it, and they say we recommend having an opacity filter that can be applied to windows. And I can tell you that they are summarily ignored. There's no regulations whatsoever. And probably the conclusion that I came to was that all of the lights that were changed on the exterior of the homes to turtle-friendly lighting were a gesture at best. And all of the interior lights were blasting onto the beach, and it was far more causative to impacting the sea turtles negatively. The point is significant, and it's a problem that the Florida Wildlife Commission and the counties and those in the regulatory bodies are addressing.
Okay,
Very good. Very good.
we had a couple of questions prepared, but they were all answered through the presentation and through the questions that you guys had for Pete. So I guess this is it. Thank you again, Pete, for joining in, for bringing us a bit closer to what your association does, to dark sky, to luminaires, to practices, to guidelines. I'm certain that you guys have found it interesting, and will be able to apply it a bit more in your projects.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very different approach, and it's an amazing thing to hear somebody who really deals with nature and what the perspective it's there and what it's done, and what we as light designer, the community and manufacturers can do in order to help this process, because we really do have hands on it, and we really can make an impact and difference. So, and the more we can learn, I think the better we can get.
I sincerely appreciate the invitation to address your audience, because this is exactly the people that that need to hear it, and they're the ones that have the questions. And if they have any more, they can contact me. It's very simple, pete@darksky.org, and I'd be happy to answer their questions offline.
Okay, good. Pete, thank you very much. Have a nice day there in Arizona. Take care. We'll definitely stay in touch. As for the knowledge, so it is for our products. It was really amazing and really appreciated.
Next week, yeah, we're going to keep it light again a bit. So we are not still certain about the location because the weather is changing here. So we'll either have a live mock-up in a pool, or if it's still nippy, we'll do a live mock-up with some fittings and discuss a bit some landscape fittings and well, how to use them and how they work in a real environment.
Certainly, we'll let you know through the week. So
yeah,
thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Take care and protect the skies.
Wash your
Thank
hands.
you.
Have a nice one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, you know what?